What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Strange New Show. Keith and Mike watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Today we are talking about Season 2, Episode 7, Those Old Scientists. I am here with my co-host, Mike, and my other co-host, Charlie, who decided he wanted to be on camera today.
Understood.
How is it going, buddy?
It's going good, man. I was up a little late last night. Starfield came out, Keith, and so I was playing that to the wee morning. I've got thoughts, but I haven't played long enough to have enough thoughts, but we'll talk about that later next week. And so this morning I got in the beanbag and I watched this episode, and I have to say, I laughed my ass off.
I did too.
We'll talk about it, but I want to say that for those of you watching, if you are a patron of the show, you can actually watch Keith and I watch the pilot of Lower Decks, which plays into this episode today, and I would say adds quite a bit. I'm glad to all of the people who allowed me to who recommended that we watch that. So we did that, and it was pretty rad.
All right. I'm having to give Charlie his treats, so he'll leave me alone during the show, because that's the type of professionalism you get here on the show. I got the bag of dental treats for Charlie, which he goes nuts for, and it is how I'm able to get him to stop walking over my feet while I'm talking. So yes, I'm excited to talk about this episode very much. But before we do that, we have to talk about last week's episode.
You're right,
and your ratings for Lost in Translation. It's funny. I expected that our loyal viewers, who I feel are family, who I felt saw me. I thought we saw the world in the same way. But you know what? When it came down to Team Porn Stash Kirk or Team Regular Kirk, everybody chose Regular Kirk, not me. I feel.
I like when I'm right, Keith. I like when I'm right.
Does it make you right, or does it make everyone else wrong?
Well, that's fair.
That is my question. But nonetheless, thank you all for chiming in, and here are your ratings, even though you were all wrong. Team Porn Stash Kirk. Jason Moe gives it an 86. Kevin Miles comes in with an 85. Worf's Boot Shifts with a 65. Harry Pothead with a 75. And JD also with a 75, and that averages out to math. All right, so
that's it.
That's it. So now let's talk about the episode, Those Old Scientists, which normally, when I say what day it aired, I have to go and re-look up with the top song, the top movie, and the Weekly World News headline, all that kind of stuff. But guess what?
What, Keith?
They dropped this episode 2 days after the last episode as a surprise for the attendees of the San Diego Comic-Con, which means all that data is the same. But so obviously a crossover with Lower Decks was a hotly anticipated episode, and so they dropped it early as a surprise, which was really cool, and definitely, what's the word? Surprised. So that means our top song continued to be Last Night again. The top movie continued to be Barbie. And the Weekly World News headline continued to be about Bush still invading that moon. Apparently, the invasion of the moon took more than 2 days. There we go.
Well, Keith, wait.
Uh-oh.
I want to say something while we're here.
Uh-oh.
Because I rarely surprise you on the show. But I need to just get some, I want to make sure I get it. Yes. This is a highly anticipated crossover episode. We all know this. But Keith, do you know I did some research with a friend of the show, JD Makes, and wanted to point out that before we get too ahead of ourselves, this is not the most anticipated crossover in Star Trek. Because I think everyone would agree that the most anticipated...
Wait, let me guess.
Okay.
Let me guess.
Crossover. Most anticipated crossover.
Most anticipated crossover in Trek. I would imagine that it would be Unification Part 1 and 2. Spock coming over on Next Gen?
Many would say that, but that's not what I would say, and it's surely not what JD would say. And JD and
I'm so curious.
Much like Team Pike, or Team Newkirk, we agree on this one. We're Team Webster.
they had to do their own beam. They couldn't use the next gen beam, and they didn't even get him in there. They just. Oh wait, no, he's there now.
He's there, yeah.
Man, this is really getting weird.
Oh my god, I've never seen this.
No.
How did you come aboard the Starship Enterprise?
Worf is the only actual cast member.
Sure.
Far forward. Maybe I should have
Season
gotten
2,
that
obviously.
extended warranty.
1989.
You look like an Earthling, but your style of dress is puzzling.
This must have been like a UPN
thanks.
crossover.
I kind of like to stay one step
Well,
ahead of the
syndicated.
CBS,
Next
yeah.
syndicated.
No one else
Syndicated.
will be wearing this until 1990.
That was more than 300 years ago. You're in the
That canned
24th
laughter,
century.
man.
No way, Jose.
The intruder is unarmed, Lieutenant Worf.
That's amazing.
Man,
They got the set, right?
No, that's
really
that's
cool.
the real set.
Cool. The temperature on the Enterprise never varies.
no! Red, cool, blazing.
That is a language I do not understand. There are many things about your time I do not understand, such as your customs.
Like what?
Your social customs, like mud wrestling.
Something tells me
Groundhog Day,
Webster's not coming for us,
dancing
Keith.
for fun.
I think we're
Well, I just
nobody watched
Come
this
on,
show. There's
look.
nothing to monetize.
Please, Worf, please.
Oh, come on.
Please.
Told
They
you.
held him at gunpoint for dancing.
Come on, man, cool it.
So anyway, Keith, I think
Wow.
that that will.
I had no idea that existed.
well, it does,
That's fantastic.
And you're welcome. Thanks to a friend of the show for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, geez, thanks, JD. That's amazing.
Oh.
Oh, wow. Oh, the ship. We went to warp for a second there. Well,
All right.
oh, you know what? That ties in nicely with what I was going to say next, because I want to introduce the director of Those Old Scientists, who played on that bridge quite a bit, because Frakes directed this one.
Hey,
Jonathan Frakes, frequent Trek director.
They make a Riker reference when they're talking
They
about the
sure
saddle,
do,
right? Yeah.
which is all the more hilarious. And Worf gets a shout out in the
Yep,
episode
yep.
too.
Mhm.
So there you go. We were in good hands with Mr. Jonathan Frakes. This episode was written by Catherine Lynn, who last wrote on Charades, and Bill Wolkoff, who last wrote on Lift Us, We're Suffering. You know who we try to lift, although most of the time we make them suffer, Mike? It's our patrons, who
yeah.
you can find at patreon.com/K&M. Mike, please introduce our friends and explain to the rest of us what they're getting.
Yeah, Keith, I'll do that. I had to change our ambient sound because I was using the wrong one. No wonder it sounded weird. Hey, thanks to our patrons. They get to watch us watch Lower Decks this week. They get to watch me in the beanbag watching this show, and then they get to watch me watching the other shows, and we got other stuff. We got Brian Kimball, Beersock, Casey Clark, Jason Moe, Joshua Cronin, Andrew Hayes, Jorge Naveau, and the Mysterious Worf's Boot Chivs, Charles Babbage, Richard Coleman, Harry Pothead, CRM Productions, Nikolai Ivanovich Lobachevsky, Delusions at Noon, Steve Brown, YouTube viewer, JD Meeks, Colin Dagan, Chris Mitchell, CRM, Pat, and Joshua Cronin send us stuff in the mail. And you know what? There's you can take a break if you need to, Keith. You can always come back to the patron. There's no rules. No, we're not gonna get mad at you. Somebody sent me an apology that they got to take a month off. Hey, we get it.
Oh,
Times
please.
is hard. Times is hard, as Mrs. Lovett would say, but you're producing the show. You've helped us. We love each and every one of you. You get some bonus content, but you get the pride of knowing that you're keeping a small, independent channel rocking and rolling, even though they're trying their hardest to get demonetized with Webster.
Yeah, what? Exactly. All right. So, I think it's time for everybody's favorite segment.
Yeah.
We got a lot this week. Now, Keith, waste your time
With fun.
with trivial trivia. Okay, so I mentioned previously that Jonathan Frakes is directing this episode,
Sweet.
but did you know they reference another episode in this episode that was also directed by Jonathan Frakes? Can you guess which one that was?
No idea. No idea.
Well, we got a reference to a Deep Space Nine episode that also involved time travel, maybe going back to San Francisco and things are all bad.
Did they? How did they how did they refer to that?
They do. Like, oh, at least we didn't get sent back to San Francisco and everything's dark and whatever. I forgot exactly what the line is.
I know it's funny when we were watching it. I think during that line, I said that must be referring to something, even though I should have known.
The episode you have spent. All right, let's think it through. So you spent 2 hours watching it because it's a two-parter, and then you spent 3 hours discussing it. So you spent 5 hours of your short life on this episode, and you did not get the reference.
Hey man, I got a lot of the Lower Decks references, even though I've only watched 2 episodes, which is interesting.
Yeah, well, there you go. This episode premiered 5 days early, as I said, for Comic-Con, right? But this also meant that they subsequently moved up the rest of the season a week early as a result, because they did not want to leave a hole when they were regularly dropping. Interesting. When Boimler wakes up on sickbay, we see a Starfleet insignia on the bottom of his boots, as he does on Lower Decks. Little details, really, the detail stuff was very
The rolled up sleeves that I made a comment on our watch
The rolled up sleeves, of course.
The cadence, they make reference to the fast talking.
Everyone's talking so slow and so quietly. So cool. When Boimler gets a point of view shot when he gets on the bridge for the first time, right? That is a replay of the same basic shot, including going up and touching the captain's little console there, that Wesley Crusher got in Encounter at Farpoint, the pilot of Next Generation.
Cool.
So cool. And I don't know if you picked up on it. I can pretty much bet money that you didn't. But do you remember Setlik and why that might be important? We're on Setlik, or we're trying to get people food on Setlik 2. But do you remember Setlik 3 and how that might be important?
Yes. Oh man, now that you're saying it, I do, but I cannot put my finger on it. But at the second you say it, I'm going to go, oh!
That was where there was a horrible battle where O'Brien becomes a war hero.
Right, yes. And he and Bashir are like, that's something different. Okay, go ahead.
No, but that's where that's where on the Next Gen episode with Bob Gutton, they're talking about the Setlik 3 massacre, etc., etc. So that's kind of cool. You know what else is really cool? The guest stars this week, because we got some. This is crazy. I can't believe we were able to pull this off. We have Tawny Newsome as Beckett Mariner. We have Jack Quaid as Brad Boimler in real life. We have the voices of Noel Wells as Tendi, Eugene Cordero as Rutherford, and Jerry O'Connell as Jack Ransom. We're also guest starring Greg Burke as Hark Harris, and Carol Kane is back as Elia.
So the voice actors are not doing the live action shoot.
No, these are the voice actors.
So the people appearing on the show are also the voice actors.
Yes.
So awesome. So awesome, because I compliment, and we will compliment on my watch along, just how much research they did to get the physicalities right.
It's them.
It makes sense because they have to watch, the playback
animation,
as they're doing it, and so they are very well versed in the show as well. So it's really awesome. Their work in this episode is fantastic. They are not just voice actors. They are fully fleshed performers, and it's wonderful.
I mean, they're real. They're real actors. Jack Quaid is like a movie star. Like,
yeah. I'm just saying, like, it's not.
It is fascinating. I wonder if in the casting of the show they anticipated that they might do this, because most of the actors match their characters in how they look.
I think often they do that anyhow, just to kind of, because it gives animators love
similarities there.
Yeah, similarities and like stuff they can model, But
a lot of the animated series out there, they don't look anything like, that especially all the Nickelodeon stuff. SpongeBob does not look like a sponge. But I don't know. I guess they must have had it in the back of their head that they might want to have some matching there, because
even when he does the walk versus the power walk.
Oh my god, the power! I almost fell out of my chair with the power walk twice.
And it's really cool to see the sort of we've complimented on the sort of cool futuristic design of the uniform, and get to see that practically is really cool.
It looks great in real life. We need to get into the show. What are we doing? We're doing it. Let's go into our screening room
Let's
so
do
we
it.
can see it.
Ba da da. I won't give it away, but I am. Or let's just roll.
Okay, so in our teaser, we begin in log form and at 16:9, holy crap, from Ensign Boimler, and we're animated. We're on the Cerritos, and they are here to check out a long-defunct portal. I imagine I suppose most people watching this knew that there was going to be a crossover, but if you didn't, that must have been so fun. And we learn that this long-defunct portal was discovered by Captain Pike and the Enterprise. And Boimler name-checks a bunch of the folks that he refers to as those old scientists, i.e. TOS. Which, of course, isn't really right anymore, because he's talking about the TOS era, but that's not. This is SNW, not TOS.
But you know what? We're going to allow it because the joke is good.
We'll allow it because, well, and they were doing it before Strange New World, I think, even existed. So anyway, Tendi and Rutherford are going to go too. So they beam down to the planet and they examine the ancient portal. Tendi mentions that the portal was actually discovered by the Orions, her species. In fact, it was her great-grandmother. And Boimler points out that he expected all of the Orions at that point to be pirates. Because they kind of were, but we're going to learn it's a little bit more than that. And so, anyway, what was I going to say? Rutherford discovers that there is some heronium detected on the portal, which is an element that is now super rare, but used to be used in the building of the hulls of the NX-era ships, i.e. from the Enterprise series. Which I really appreciated. They showed Enterprise some love on this show.
Yeah, and once again, even though the trope stands true. You know, they drop little nuggets of what seems to be extraneous information in these teasers that come back to be the whole thing, like the whole pirate. Yeah. We're not all pirates, and the magic element. It's just really great. It always happens, but it's always clever to me when it happens when they pull it at the end.
Yeah, no, that's just good writing. So we learn that Mariner is a big Uhura fan, and they take a picture in front of the portal, and the Flash triggers the portal, sending Boimler back in time and into live action. So there is Jack Quaid as Boimler. He runs into Spock, La'an, and Una, and immediately passes out. Of course, he has to. Then we get an animated version of the credits. Loved it. So much work.
Yeah.
To go in and completely animate the credits. There's no way that they could have done this, but I
didn't look. Was it the Strange New World intro just animated?
Yes.
So I wasn't sure if it was definitely the theme song. It was definitely the theme song.
Yeah, no, it was it was their intro animated with a couple of Easter eggs.
Like a koala bear at the end.
The koala bear is a reference to another Lower Decks episode. But we also saw the ship being sucked on by that space creature, like we see in the some great Easter eggs in there. It was all digital to begin with, but I don't think you can just put a filter on it to make it animated like Lower Decks. Right. I had to redo all of that. Crazy, so impressive. Anyway, so in Act 1, Pike explains that we're en route to bring some grain to Setlik 2. Una explains that Boimler's Delta is also a communicator, and Pike says, but flipping them open is the best part. Very funny.
Keith, did you mention earlier if the writers on this episode bleed over from Lower Decks?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think particularly Catherine Lynn wrote on and was a producer of Lower Decks. So there's actually a fair amount of crossover anyway, but they definitely brought in Lower Decks people to work on this.
The pacing, once again, and the sort of one-liners and the comedy, I thought, was actually written, let's say, stronger because they had, I think, an assist from a pretty specifically comedic team.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was always going to be the problem with this. How could you pull off tonally these two shows existing in the same world? But Strange New Worlds is pretty tonally comedic,
Mhm.
more than any other series, other than Lower Decks, obviously. So it was primed. The pump was primed to go in a fully comedic direction. Anyway, so Boimler wakes up and thinks he's on the holodeck, of course, and he knows who everybody is and is super excited. No surprise. Then he sees Una and freaks out. And she is immediately nervous that he knows something terrible about her future, which makes sense. I mean, it has to be really odd to have somebody know everything about you that comes from the future. And there's a really interesting episode of Next Gen where that happens. That somebody comes in the future and is like, "Oh, you're all famous" or whatever. But then
It's good because the sort of joke of Pike continually being flustered and flattered by him.
Totally flattered.
I think that is made stronger by the fact that it is buttressed against Una's experience.
Right. That they have completely different reactions, which is weird because Pike does have the horrible future.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. He's optimistic. I like it. La'an reviews temporal protocols with Boimler. Don't mess with anything and don't give any information about the future. How's that going to go?
Also, don't get a crush.
Don't get a crush on somebody who's not even on the show, but they're going to make him on the show now. Anyway, they leave him alone in the conference room, and Boimler finds a saddle in the conference room and Rikers it. Hilarious, especially with Frakes as the director. The other thing I noticed, this is a good screenshot to illustrate it. Boimler isn't
he's epically tall.
He's so tall. I don't think he's that tall on the animated series.
Yeah,
but
the
he
scale
towers
is
over
not correct.
Everybody.
Which is interesting because this is the only shot where they actually the scale bothers me. The rest of they recognized in the dailies. They're like, oh man, he's gargantuan, and they kind of reframe a lot of the other shots in order to make it not so abrupt.
Well, here's the crazy thing.
He's what? He's 5'9".
He's 6 feet.
Yeah, she must just be really short.
Wait, but he towers over Pike too. Is Pike a tiny person? Hold on. I need to go.
Man, I didn't think I was gonna have to edit this episode, but would have to cut it like 12 times.
This is great.
Yeah, this is good.
This isn't bad. I'm just talking. No, so Pike is 5'11" and a half. He's only an inch taller than Pike, but the shot makes him look much taller.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That is interesting. Did they go in the opposite way, try to make him look taller than he is? I don't know. Let's just keep an eye on it as we move forward. So then he meets Uhura. They head back to the portal, and Boimler continues to freak out about Spock, Mbenga, and the technology. And he explains that he got sent back, how he got sent back, and makes a joke that Spock laughs at. This was not what Boimler expected. We go to the bridge, and they spot an Orion vessel arriving at the planet, which they of course assume to be a pirate ship. Spock smile. There's so many horror smiles from Spock.
And every time it made me laugh. It was really well done.
It's really funny.
Because he's just crushing basically, and Boimler thinks he's destroyed the great Spock.
It's such a funny gag. It also, and I think I mentioned it later, but I'll talk about it now, is a good fix for the Cage, the unaired pilot of Star Trek, and the clips of this were shown in the two-parter they did later that season in the main line. But there's a scene in that where Spock smiles, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's never really addressed. And this actually explains why Spock smiled when he sniffed the flower in the Cage, because he's all Twitter-pated and he's exploring himself. So there it is. Don't make that face. Everybody's like, yeah.
Everybody?
Pretty much universally.
Chapel is. That's for sure.
Yeah, so's Mariner. So's Mike. Anyway, so Yeah, but Boimler shows up on the bridge and continues to freak out about the 1701-nothing. No bloody A, no bloody B. Pretty cool. Pike has to dad Boimler to try to get him to behave and stop yelling everyone's future at them, which I thought was pretty
really
funny.
great.
And of course he says, I think it's a science vessel, which is news to everybody, and they get hailed by the Orions, who confirm that it is indeed a science vessel. But as they talk, the Orions beam the portal on board and warp out. So, like, it's a science, but we're going to steal this, which I thought was funny.
They contain multitudes, Keith.
Multitudes, that's right. We're all scientists and we're all pirates in our own way. So in Act 2, Pike and Una discuss Boimler's reactions to them both. Pike thinks it might mean something positive about his chances of survival, and Una doesn't understand why he looks terrified. Good little scene there. So we go to 10 forward, and Chapel and Ortegas mercilessly tease Boimler, which is pretty funny. He waxes eloquent about them living in the golden age of exploration. And he also gives away that it's almost Pike's birthday, which is a holiday in his timeline. It is interesting that Chapel and Ortegas choose to tease this guy like they did. But I guess he's sort of like a buffoon.
Yeah, well, and they showed in a previous episode where they're kind of hazing the young people. They're all having fun. They're playing the game to the young ensigns and stuff. So this is just further along that line. So it's not like out of character for them at all, I don't think.
You know, it's funny. I think I like the Lower Decks uniform better live action than I do animated.
I really like it. I also like this version of Boimler. I actually think it informs, as a good crossover should, it informs his cartoon character a little bit, because while we do get some moments of sort of very few, but where it slows down and he's a real person for a second,
you've only seen 2 episodes.
Yeah, true. But he's like, he gets a couple moments here to really be, he's just a fanboy, right? Which actually is what you want. It's kind of, you want somebody who knows all the stuff and is respects it and has a reverence. I think it works. This episode will go on, and you will hear in my praise. It goes on. It moves both ways, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. No, for sure. And that is, if you've seen more of Lower Decks, that's very much a part of his character. They didn't add that for this episode. He is a super fanboy of all of our heroes.
I think the major question, and I had it here, right? I know they stole the portal, but my question was going to be, will this episode rise above just the gimmick of the crossover,
hijinks of
right?
it.
The hijinks of it. Like, will it have something to say? Will there be an interesting dramatic tension? And we'll see.
Yeah. Well, there it is. So then Chapel sees Spock, and Spock smiles like he's in a horror movie. It is terrifying and hilarious. Boimler.
You know who he looks like, actually, in his getup here is Jack White.
He does look a little like Jack White.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There you have it.
With the purple hair. Looks good.
I like the purple.
Maybe if you get bored with gray, you should go with purple.
Do you think the purple? Well, guess what? That's what's next. I use purple shampoo for that very reason.
Oh wow.
Is the purple? Is it just a dye, or do you think is there a subtle digital enhancement?
Oh no, I'm sure it's the wig.
You think it's a wig?
So, of course.
Yeah. Okay. It's good. In fact, this
dye.
episode more than a lot. There's so many cool practical effects I really liked.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting for such a iconic and important episode. It's not very expensive. It's almost a bottle episode.
Yeah. Like the tricorder they use later is really cool. I was like, I want one of those. The sort of thing that him and Spock put over the helmet.
Well, Playmates makes a tricorder very similar to that.
Oh, well, guess
what
what?
they did back in the 90s. So you can go get yourself one.
I might just do that.
Yeah, you might.
He's horrified. Nerds. He's horrified by Spock.
We're such nerds. So Boimler then talks to Chapel.
Her eyes are up there, Boimler.
Yeah, Boimler. Yeah, Keith. I mean, Boimler. He's afraid that he broke Spock. and is afraid that he's going to break the future. And it talks about how much he knows about Spock, and he's never like this, and he's read all the things. And sadly, Chapel picks up immediately that she's not a part of any of that.
And gives a really moving performance.
She really does.
In this little scene, this elevator scene, and I was like, oh, it almost brought me a little, a choke up.
Oh, I mean, Jess Bush is very, very good. Yeah, so she picks up immediately. Not going to be part of his future. It's heartbreaking, and Boimler realizes immediately what he has done. He goes to the bridge and finds them trying to figure out how to track the Orions. And eventually they agree to let him fix the computer so they can track them as long as they don't look.
That made me guffaw.
So silly. They, of course, catch up with the Orions and they negotiate. They need to negotiate so they don't blow up Tendy's great-grandma. Makes sense. They agree to trade the portal for all the grain they were going to bring back to the settlers. Then they head back to the surface and prepare to send Boimler back with the very last of the Heronium. They say goodbye, they open the portal, and Mariner jumps through and eating up the rest of their time travel goo. But now we have Mariner there. Love it. Way to escalate it. I mean, you knew there had to be some sort of a twist, and you know they had to screw it up a little harder than they did. So fun. And now we have Mariner. Really cool. So in Act 3, now Mariner and Boimler are there in the conference room, and Mariner points out accurately that Spock is unexpectedly super hot. And they're stuck now because they're out of Heronium, and there hasn't been any in the sector in 100 years. Uh-oh. Mariner suggests making some, and Spock agrees to try with Boimler's help. Meanwhile, Mariner offers to help Uhura with the translation.
Oh, they're all going to fangirl.
They're all going to fangirl, and Spock makes another terrifying smile. Yeah. Later, he's really good at doing the smile with the dead eyes, which is a specific acting trick. Folks, if you want to be creepy, smile with dead eyes. Yeah, it's horrifying. Anyway, later in the hallway, Boimler hilariously runs up to Mariner like he runs in the animated show.
God, so
Arms
good.
akimbo. I mean, this scene, the physical comedy we get from Quaid is ridiculously good. He's nervous about being stuck here, but then Una shows up and he power walks away.
So good. That was oh God, so good.
Funniest moment in the show. I almost fell out of my chair. Una asks Mariner why she freaks Boimler out, and Mariner's not helpful and says, "Oh, she's got a poster of you hanging up over his bunk." Una naturally thinks it's a poster of her from X-Men, only wearing paint. Later, Mariner fangirls Uhura, who thinks that all of this attention to all of her future heroism is putting a lot of pressure on her, which is a pretty fair thing to say. Like, that's it. I mean, it's nice that, obviously something happened that made me famous and successful, but it's kind of a lot.
Yeah, but it's good writing and it's good beats. And guess what? It's great that this scene is delivered from this POV because like you said, I've only watched 2 episodes of Lower Decks, but I'm guessing that she dealing with some stuff because her whole family are super high uppity-ups in Starfleet, and she's got a lot to live up to.
That's right.
As well. Yeah.
No, she definitely understands that. Yeah, it's a good point. So Mariner takes Uhura to take a break in the bar with Ortegas. Mariner has made some fake Orion cocktails, and we find out that they're going to do a surprise party for Pike. And Uhura is still working. We hit this last episode too, that Uhura is a workaholic. Ortegas notices that the glyphs on the portal are actually ancient Nausicaan, which gives us a chance to reference tapestry. Fantastic episode of Next Generation. You haven't seen that. Do you know that that Picard has a bionic heart?
Well, I do now.
Because he got his heart stabbed out by Nausicaans playing Domjot.
Oh, well then now that's great. It's good to know.
Yeah, well, it's all gonna be it's a great episode. We should watch that for the patrons sometime.
Whoa! Nailed it.
I mean, that's what that Orion drink will do to you. It's not good. So Spock and Boimler discuss his emotions while trying to create the time travel goo. And obviously, he's aware that he really upset his girlfriend, so that's not great.
A lot of cool practical effects in here. A Yeti thermos, my exact Yeti thermos.
Well, I mean, it's a good thermos. It could not be improved.
And this lid they put on the thing I thought was really cool, too. This looks like the containers that Master of Marketing, what's her name, Cassidy Yates uses.
Cassidy Yates would use. That's true. I still got a sticker. They tried to take it off, but the stickers are hard to get off.
You need Goo Gone, Amazon.com.
Goo Gone or WD-40. Anyway, they turn on the centrifuge and it explodes, doing nothing. Which is interesting because with these two little attempts they do, Uhura's trying to translate the thing, they're trying to make it, neither of them are of any use whatsoever. Mm-hmm. They both utterly fail. Then Boimler chats with Carol Kane, and she explains that because they gave away the grain, they're going to have to relocate the entire colony of Setlik 2, and Boimler realizes how much he has screwed up by being here. So, naturally, he goes to steal a shuttle and get the grain back.
Let's not sell out that Carol Kane has an awesome line here, like such a Star Trek line, about the whole wise person once said, if you can't become the person you want, pretend to be them until you become someone. It's much better than that.
Yeah, that's a quote from, who's that old movie star? Whatever it is. It's a famous quote, but also, like, explains our entire existence.
That's true.
We're pretending to be many things. Still waiting for it to become true, but we're good at pretending.
Yeah.
So he goes to try to steal shuttle pop, get the grain back, and Mariner's already there. And they hilariously complain that everyone talks so slowly and quietly. Naturally.
And an actual adjustment for them as well, because the pace is very much faster on the animated show, and here they had to just change technique entirely. Really, yeah. It's a much harder. Their job this week was much harder than it appears to be. It's just like, oh, I'm going to be on the main show and goof off and stuff. No, they had to do a shit ton of work, and I really think they nailed it.
No, I mean the work is evident in this whole thing, which is very much appreciated. Naturally, they were caught by La'an and taken to Pike's quarters. And he finally does the smart thing and confines them to quarters, which he should have done last week as well. We find out that Boimler went as Pike for Halloween, and Pike hilariously is flattered for an instant. Great comedic beats here, which I thought was great. Pike then asks them to squash the surprise birthday. He doesn't want to go to anymore because this is the first birthday where he's going to be older than his father was when he died. And he wants to spend it alone with the memory of his father because he wishes he had one more moment with him. Okay, good. Boimler makes an amazing point, saying that one day when he's gone, the people throwing him the party may wish they had one more moment with him. Mm-hmm. And damn, that is a life lesson.
Yeah, I'll say it here, and then I'll belabor the point later. But there are like 4 or 5 scenes/speeches in this episode. This one coming up with number 1 at the end. In the beginning, Carol Kane's line. There's just a ton that could be trite, right? But literally none of them ring trite. They all are played with pathos. They're all played with empathy, and they tie into the themes of the episode and the themes of the show, and seem to have been like really well articulated and paced. Instead of sometimes, we complain about this show, they shoehorn stuff in or the pacing is a little off. Here, I really think they nail it, and so all of these things actually make impact. In fact, one coming up, this one got me a little bit, just because it's a little personal. But there's one coming up that actually gave me goosebumps, and we'll talk about when we get there. So, a really great scene again.
Yeah, I mean, in this scene, obviously, I instantly thought of you, but also, this advice landed on me too, because that's something I forget,
Mm-hmm.
right? That like your birthday's not really about you,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's and that to keep in mind that you have an effect on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, it's not like you're trying to like be mean to other people, but you sort of forget that you're important to other people. And I think that that is true, you know, in complex family situations and friend situations, that like you might have a bigger impact than you think you do.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Also, I'll bring up two other points to this to belabor it. One, and I had these conversations recently, so it's actually apropos. One, recently, darkly, some of my family members have been talking about just discussing, because there were been some passings that young folks, and people have been discussing like what they'd like to see for their memorial service or whatnot. And my brother was big on do nothing, like I don't want anything or any blah blah blah, which I get, right? That's your prerogative. But I had to remind him that I was like, funerals aren't really about your wishes, man. Funerals is giving his problem is that they become performative, which can be true, but that's not the point. The point is people need to express their grief or want to share in that feeling together. If you deny them that, it's very difficult to start the grieving process. So that's one. Two, I've always been a fan of plays or creepy creeps or whatever that don't have curtain calls. In fact, I hate curtain calls. I despise bowing. I despise that weird feeling of like we just did this whole thing where we were pretending, and now it's like, hey, I'm wearing a costume, clap for me. But a very good director who, and as I get older, I recognize it's not about recognition.
Not for you, buddy.
Yeah, it's not about me getting recognition. It's about giving the audience the opportunity to share in the experience and give their gratitude or express whatever they're feeling. So that's what it's about.
They're sending back the information the other way. They're participating in a two-way conversation, which you don't get in anything other than live performance.
Yeah, so celebration and birthdays and whatnot, not always something. Hey, that's just a life lesson for everybody. Sometimes it's not about you. In fact, rarely is.
Yeah, interesting, and it's a very good point about like funerals and that kind of stuff, because I think I would like on first blush be right where your brother is like, don't do anything, it doesn't matter. But then I think about it now with that in context, like do whatever you want to do. Do whatever you think is you. Do whatever you need. I'm not gonna give a crap. I'll be dead. I don't care. Anyway.
And if there's something past this, I always say this: if there's something past this, guess what I won't be doing? Coming back to visit this crap. I'll be on to the next, baby.
You don't know. It depends on what it is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, with any luck, you basically just live in a holodeck.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
That does sound pretty cool.
All right. Hopefully, with the
Pike Carbonara. Yeah.
We went in different directions.
We sure did. Keith wants porno, and I just want food.
You're just hungry.
Yeah.
Anyway, Pike empathizes with how hard it must be to be in the past and imagines what it would have been like to be on Archer's Enterprise. And that triggers Boimler's solution.
Great writing.
Home.
Great way to segue into the solution.
There it is. So in Act 4, Boimler and Mariner explain that they visited the NX-01 at a museum and learned that they used heronium alloy in the construction of the ship.
Well, you see, this was a weird segue shot. I'm guessing it's the ceiling mirror, but they never pan away from it. They just cut to the cross view, so it just made this look weirdly skewed.
But there isn't a mirror on the ceiling.
So it's just like a weirdly droned,
like a shot top down,
stretched out drone shot. It's weird.
I kind of like it, but I see your point.
I thought for sure it was a mirror and we were going to pan down from it.
Right.
But we didn't get that. We just get a cross.
But if you go to the next shot, I don't see a mirror there.
Can't quite see above them. There could be. Well, anyway.
So we know that the NX-01 used heronium in the construction of the ship. And there's a tradition of starting new ships with a piece of the previous ship with that name. Cool tradition. I don't know if that's been established before, but I love the idea of that. So
I guess it's kind of like breaking a bottle on a ship's bow.
Yeah, it's like one of those things. And I don't know, is people who are smarter than us, is there a tradition of that with like battleships or stuff like that?
Well, assuming that the previous ship has been decommissioned, I don't think that's always the case. Usually they keep these things in operation much longer, but I'm sure it's based on something.
Well, they don't have. They're never going to have two Enterprises in circulation at the same time. So one of them would have to be they might have other of that class continue to go on, but of the actual same.
Well, I don't think they do that much in ships. Like you have your Queen Mary 2, but that's not a continuation. I don't know. I
not
really
the
don't
same.
know.
Yeah, I don't know. Boat people or airplane. I don't know. Whatever the people are that would. I think it would be more like military.
Battleship or something. I don't know.
Anyway, cool idea. I like it. It feels very Star Trek to me. So
it's a great solution to the issue, and it's been below our noses the whole time. Great.
Right. And because there's a piece of the NX-01 on the ship with some more Heronium. So they pull some Heronium left under a deck plate in engineering. I'm a little lost as to why it's in a canister, because I thought it was an alloy. I don't understand that part of it. That doesn't make any sense to me.
It's like a time capsule. It felt like a time capsule to me. Like you do, like, why do we put like some shirts and stuff into a giant? Right,
but but I thought they started with the whole plate, like an actual piece of the hull, and then built around it. But it's
I see. I catch your point.
A liquid goo. That's going to be a wormhole for me, but we'll get there. Doesn't really matter.
Someone's going to fix that. Someone knows. It seems,
somebody fixed that. Yeah. What the hell is that? So anyway, Ortegas and Uhura, while they're doing this, are geeking out about the Enterprise crew, shouting out all of those fine folks from Star Trek Enterprise, sounding just like Mariner and Boimler, which is great. So we go to the transporter room, and Mariner explains that the reason Boimler is a weirdo around Una is that the poster he has up in his bunk is the recruitment poster for Starfleet. And this is obviously very meaningful to Una, considering they just tried to throw her in prison.
This is the scene that choked me up, and I got goosebumps. I just thought it was a great way to square that circle from her big episode and the Ad Astra, and his sort of. That's a crazy feeling that even something small as I had a friend's sister actually growing up, and I ran into her. She's a dentist now, and I ran into her, and the first thing she said to me, she has 2 kids now, and I just know her as my buddy's little sister. She's like, "You taught me how to tie my shoes." I remember that. I remember remember teaching me how to tie my shoes, and even that. And I think about some of the campers I had back in the day when I ran a camp, and people were like, "Hey, you help me ride a bike. You help me do this." These things seem insignificant. It makes you feel like you're not just kind of, I don't know how to explain it better. It's a crazy to have any impact on a person. And when they can express that to you, it's even crazier. And so I can imagine saying, you are the reason I want to be in Starfleet. Like that she kind of won that mission.
Yeah.
That whole challenge that was set up for her. Like, did we make enough of an impact in this show trial? That's a huge moment. It really choked me up. And they all play it great. And
beyond that, it's such a representation of progress within Starfleet, because the obvious parallel would be, gays in the military, right? Where like in 1998, they were excluded and kicked out of the military. And now you might see a recruitment poster for the military specifically aimed at gay soldiers.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like the parallel there. And it's like, oh, wow, that is a huge moment of we want you because of this.
And shout out to Rebecca Romaine. She plays that impact. It's subtle, but it's powerful. Great scene again.
Yeah, does a very good job. So they head back to the planet, and the Orions are waiting there. And they agree to trade the grain back for giving the Orions...
Hold on, this Spock beat was great.
The live long and prosper and Boimler biffing it on the way out. Hilarious. Because we've all done it.
Mm-hmm.
We have, how many times I've run into either like a celebrity or a producer or something that I am intimidated by, and then just the word salad you make. God.
I used to be much worse than I am now, thank God.
But shoes, Bert.
Although interesting, so this is like a wormhole / just production thing, but also I want to know the Trek experience here. So as he's being beamed, right? He's doing live long and prosper.
Right.
When they reapparate on the planet, he's got his hands behind his back. So
That's a mistake.
that is a mistake. So
Yeah.
I am to believe that it's instantaneous and that your matter reapparates, if that's a word.
Yeah, it reassembles.
In the exact same situation.
Position that you were in. That's a mistake.
Okay. So that's an official wormhole. Logged.
Official mistake there. Because I believe once you are disassembled, you are no longer able to move or think or have agency because you're scattered into a trillion little pieces. I didn't catch that. So anyway, they make a deal with the Orions. They give them credit for finding the portal in exchange for the grain. Great. Because, it's all about the Orion's scientists
Doesn't make them
trying to
bad guys.
establish.
It doesn't make that. It makes their journey make sense. It ties everything back to the beginning of the episode, and it's like actually hugely impactful for the history of history.
And obviously, why it's important to the scientists. Like, hey, look, we're not all pirates. Like, having a discovery like this on the books is very validating for a whole thing. And it's actually sort of similar to the discussion we were having about the Ferengi. And like, they must have scientists who are trying to, who are not all wrapped up. And it's the same thing to have Klingon scientists and Klingon artists and this.
Actually, a great point to sci-fi, to space exploration. I was listening to NPR recently about the Indian team who just touched down on the moon, and it's funny because you go back and you think about all the space race, and it's us versus them, it's us versus the Soviets, it's this, it's that, it's that. When are we going back to the moon, and how is the Indian team's work going to catapult us and make us like put money in or whatever? Anyway, they were interviewing somebody at NASA and somebody on the Indian team, and they were like, "Yo, just to remind everybody, we don't concern ourselves with the geopolitical BS happening. There's no race for us. We're all scientists trying to do science and trying to do space exploration. Like, we're together. We're on the same team."
And that's the same. Well, and that is both true from a philosophical standpoint, but also science by definition. I've said this before, but science by definition does not have an agenda. Science is about further exploring the truth. Doesn't matter what it is. We just want to know more of it.
We don't care that it's like, oh, that's supposed to kick us in the ass. No, we just want to tell us more about the polar caps. Like, what's we don't have a lot of data there. What's the data?
And if your only duty is to the truth, which is what science is, to have a better understanding of the truth, it is a shared language that applies to all cultures and all whatever, because the truth is the truth, whatever it is. You discover gravity, that applies to all cultures and all, whatever. And so you're right. It is immune if you are doing it correctly. If you're following its own rules, it's immune from all of that.
You lost my duty.
Makes sense. So Boimler and Mariner go back through the portal and back into Animation World. And we are back on the Cerritos. And Ransom gets to walk by and say his own wife is hot. Awesome Easter egg. Hilarious. So we head then back to the Enterprise. And this was the chef kiss finish for me. Because back on the Enterprise, we're celebrating Pike's birthday. They did it after all. And they're all drinking the real Orion drinks.
Which
makes... They got some from the scientists. And now they're animated because they're all hallucinating from the drinks. Hilarious.
So well done.
Tag.
Spock's arms.
Spock's arms. It's so great that it's such a good job of integrating those two worlds.
I would say nearly flawless.
Yeah. All right. So let's discuss whether it's flawless or not in a little after show we call...
Punch it, punch it, punch it. Just punch it, man. Just punch it.
Punch it, punch it, punch it.
Let's punch it. Hit it.
Yo, Adrian!
It's the Punchies!
Oh, that's such a good take. Such good work, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about wormholes in the plot, shall we?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor it. I'll let you do so. The Spock thing caught me. That's really all that bothered me. I know you got the the dithium plate or whatever being a plate instead of a goo. But what else you got?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, like, yeah, the Spock thing, whatever. For me, it is about the heronium of it all. Like, what is this thing that was once so easy to obtain? You built ships out of it that is now gone forever. It's odd. I feel like they could have used one more couplet to explain maybe why it got taken out. Like we ended up using it for energy or something, and something that explains why it's gone. So like I think I would have appreciated just that one little tag fixing that. Why is it a goo? I thought it was a deck plate. You know, because they talk about like, oh, they built the hulls out of it. It's the right shade of gray. Well, it's not gray. It's some sort of a canister of something. Like I didn't get that. I would have liked that to have been a little bit more clear, but the rest of it, hey, you know, we're having fun. I don't really have a big,
I guess,
which is weird. We're worried about like that and not the fact that animated people became live action and live action became animated because they made it work.
I think that there is I like that it is making a comment on sort of the self-serious nature of just how difficult time travel stories are, because we've done a bunch of them at this point, and I'm sure Trek is full of them, and how we play so fast and loose with, look, there are dire circumstances if you change anything, but at the same time it's just constant self-referencing the future. And
my god, and like,
if the rules were set like you can destroy the temporal everything, they would be just obliterated all of the time.
Oh my god, I mean, Boimler was like a machine gun of breaking time.
But I think that is a good nod to, look, we always play, it's time travel, we don't know you gotta play soft with it, and I think that fixes it. I think it's a purposeful wormhole to kind of point out that, like, it's always going to be a wormhole, y'all. Like, let's just relax about it. So I like that as a wormhole, but I'll mention it.
All right, let's do our best moment.
Yeah. I really have two I want to mention, so I'm going to just cheat and do two.
Whoa. You're breaking all the rules.
One, because it seems like such a passing moment, but I think it's so sad. The sad moment with Chapel in the elevator is sad because it's true, right? Like she is not even a footnote in the history of Spock's lore.
Yeah.
And because in the moment it makes her, it implodes her. It's all good because it's just, look, I'm not looking for anything serious. I'm just kind of like into like a fling.
Which is very much not true.
Yeah, she's clearly has a huge bout of denial about it, and this is imploding her sort of all of her checks and balances she set up emotionally to be cool with it. It got destroyed, and I thought it was just like a really heartbreaking moment. And that's that. Like, yeah. And then
which is also kind of, sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but okay. I think it like it's a little bit of a break of the fourth wall for the writers, because they've written and invested so much in this relationship, and because of canon, it's the same thing with Pike. Like, the ways that we deviate from what we know, we can't keep, because we know, Chapel does not have this relationship with Spock when the original series happens.
But they've also teased with enough breadcrumbs in different episodes that, like, there's the possibility we're going to do a strand thing, right? To kind of like allow us a little more freedom. So they haven't committed to that yet, but I'm saying they've left open possibilities.
Right.
And then the other one that really moved me, and you'd think it'd be the Pike moment, but it's not. It's the number one moment.
Yeah.
The Ad Astra moment, because I really felt like it sort of finished. It finished an arc that had kind of been dangling a little bit for Una, and it really kind of gives you a little more respect for Boimler as to kind of, he's not just like a total goof off. He is I don't know. At that moment really, like in my chair there, for all the moments of laughing and all the emotional stuff, that one gave me goosebumps. Like, it was so aspirational, which is something that I think this show is above all else.
That's what Trek is.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. The progress, the optimistic view of the future. And even though in the optimistic view of the future, that has an optimistic view of the future because progress will continue to keep happening. Yeah, so for me, I'm just because it landed for me personally, the whole birthday thing. Like, you know, that you're thinking about your missed moments with somebody else. Well, somebody else is thinking about their missed moments with you. And I think that just landed with me. Maybe because I'm selfish and I forget about those things. And I'm self-absorbed. And it was just like, oh, it's a good reminder. It's good to keep an eye on that because
let people love you, Keith.
I don't want to. Anyway, I just thought it was a really good moment.
Yeah.
I thought it's these little dashes of salt into this, which elevates the rest of the comedy a great deal. So good stuff. Well, I think we all know where we're headed. Let's hand out some STEM balls.
You get so STEM.
Woo! Hot, coming in hot.
Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some STEM balls for you.
Hey, lunchtime? Jen,
Oh.
you really outdo yourself. Thank you so much, darling.
Well balanced meal.
Yeah, it looks great.
You don't deserve her.
You know
She
what?
just brought you lunch.
You know what, Keith? It's all right that I'm being appreciated. All right?
You better be giving back as much. Hey,
do.
Dad.
I give back. Not as much. I cannot. It's not possible. But anyway, spoiler alert. I adored this episode.
Yeah.
Now I should mention I really love Lower Decks so far, and this did what so many crossovers fail to do, which was it felt like just the right amount of ingredients from each show, and I think the interaction elevated the property of each show. I loved that the story meant something outside of it because there was agency on both teams. They had to work together in order to get stuff done. I love that the interaction, the time travel stuff was fun. The animation stuff was fun. There was some character movement. We got to see Pike have a realization. We got to see Una have a realization. We got to see the fanboying of the cartoon characters actually means something about their actual characters. Their friendship actually progressed a little bit. Even though I know this takes place probably in like season 3 or 4 of Lower Decks, or it's
season 4, yeah, probably.
But for me, the biggest thing too is that the humor worked so much better than it has worked in a lot of our other comedy-focused episodes. I just think, I don't know if it was the writing or the pacing, it just all seemed to be firing on all cylinders. And above all else, of all of the episodes we've watched, this was the most fun for me. And that is an element that is hard to quantify, and it's hard to explain what makes it work or doesn't work. But in this episode, it was fun. I was laughing. And it makes the wormholes kind of not matter so much. It makes some of the...
Sure.
And then even the more serious, and on such a funny episode, I mean, it's a cartoon for God's sakes. When we hit those emotional beats, they were well performed. They landed. Keith, I'm going to go out and say it, and this is maybe a little nuts.
Oh God. Here we go.
I think this is my favorite episode of Strange New Worlds thus far.
Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable.
And so I'm going to give it 95 self-sealing stem bolts.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, I for all the reasons that you said, I also found it delightful. I mean, little wormholes aside, I didn't care because sort of just like you said, I sat right there on the couch with Charlie and I laughed my ass off.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone who laughs out loud frequently when watching TV or a movie. And I laughed out loud. Like I was home alone, house all by myself, laughing my ass off with my cat. And if that's not the purpose of this art form, I don't know what it is, right?
Oh, we almost failed to mention the awesome beat that ties the whole thing together about the scientists, like we said, and how they were able to allow them their due respect instead of just painting them as like they're all just space pirates. I thought that was really beautiful too.
It's very Star Trek. It is so Star Trek that we don't paint all people with the same brush. That's sort of in the DNA. So I won't rehash all those things that you said, but I'll say this. This did a crossover in a really unique way, because we've seen a lot of crossovers and a lot of shows, and it's usually very much one show with some other characters coming in and bouncing around. This show works equally as well as an episode of Strange New World as it does Lower Decks. You could throw this episode in both feeds and it would make sense, because it is truly an episode of both. It is balanced that way. So like if you threw different credits on it, tell me it's Lower Decks episode. Oh, yeah, I can't believe Strange New World is crossing over on Lower Decks.
100%.
Either way, which is really, really, really well done. In a lot of ways, I think being able to play with tone like this reminds me a lot of Supernatural. Did you ever watch Supernatural?
No.
It's really, really fun, and really good. And they also spent a lot of time, because it's very dramatic sometimes, it's scary sometimes, but they also have these unbelievably great comedic episodes where all of a sudden they did a full episode of Scooby-Doo. They did a fully animated, fully whatever. They did I think the best episode of the series, where they crossed over into the real world, where they were filming a show called Supernatural.
That's pretty funny.
And it was all like, oh God, I'm a guy named Jensen Ackles, whatever it was. And that was able to navigate all of those crazy tones, and including sort of directly breaking the fourth wall, and yet still having credibility in their own story. And I think this Strange New Worlds is closer to that than any other Trek show that I've ever seen, and I've really enjoyed both. So really fun. And so for me, I wrote it down before you said it. It also gets a 95 for me. I think it's the strongest episode of the season, for sure. The only episode either one of us rated higher than that was the season finale of season 1, Quality of Mercy. So really, really fantastic work from the Strange New Worlds and the Lower Decks folks coming up with a way to pull this off.
Is it next week we get the musical?
No.
2 weeks. So that's the penultimate episode.
That's right. So next week we are going to be talking about Under the Cloak of War. So that sounds exciting. We'll find out what happens next week on Strange New Show. You can check out all of our other silly nonsense shows. Check out I'm assuming if you're watching this, you're watching the Deep Space Nine show, but we're about to hit season 4. So hold on to your butts. You can, chat with us and support us at patreon.com/KNM. Other than that, we will see you back here next week with another episode of Strange New Show. Keith and Mike watch Strange New Worlds. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. I had to get it out. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.